End quote. I said, get down on your knees. You think you can just ignore the Oak Ridge Association and walk away? Well, you and Oppos, re-under our jurisdiction now, end quote. And look, I know how that sounds. It sounds like some B-movie dialogue from a guy who's watched way too many cop shows. But when you got a cold muzzle of a Glock pressed against your temple while your face is being mashed into the gravel of your own driveway, you don't laugh. You don't think about how cheesy it is. You just feel that sudden, icy realization that you're dealing with a person who has completely lost touch with reality. And honestly, it's funny how life works. I had just finished unloading the last crate of my vintage record from the back of my Ford, thinking this was it, my fresh start, my quiet little corner of North Carolina where the air smells like pine and nobody knows my business. But I guess I didn't in Oppos. Account for the fact that some people treat a homeowners association like a branch of the military, and some women treat a title like in Oppos, community liaison and Oppos, like they and Oppos, re the Queen of England. See, to understand why a man in a fake tactical vest was trying to arrest me in broad daylight, you have to understand Diane Sterling, and Diane was the kind of woman who wore her HOA badge on a lanyard like it was a Congressional Medal of Honor. She'd showed up on my porch exactly 48 hours after I'd signed the deed, and at first, she was all Southern charm and lemonade smiles, asking me what I did for a living, how long I plan on staying, and then she hit me with the big one. She asked for a spare key to my house, saying it was for an Oppos, community safety protocols and Oppos, in case of a pipe burst or a fire while I was at work. And when I laughed, because who wouldn't Oppos? T laugh at a stranger asking for a key to your life. Her face didn't in Oppos. T just fall transformed. It was like watching a mask slip, revealing this hardened, bureaucratic predator underneath. And I told her as politely as a man with a Marine background can, that my property, this specific 3-acre lot, was carved out of the original estate before the HOA even existed, meaning I wasn't an Oppos. A member, I didn't an Oppos. Owe them a dime. And I certainly didn't an Oppos. Owe her my privacy. But Diane, well, she didn't an Oppos. Take an Oppos. No an Oppos. For an answer, she took it as a declaration of war. The next few weeks were a slow burn, a series of an Oppos, compliance notices and Oppos, left on my windshield for things like the shade of green on my lawn or the fact that my truck was parked at a slight angle, and I just tossed them in the trash, waving at her whenever I saw her slow-rolling her white Lexus past my gate. But what I didn't in Oppos, know was that Diane had a plan. She wanted my property because the back end of my lot provided the only logical access point for a new community park she wanted to build, a project that would have skyrocketed her property value while cutting mine in half. And since she couldn't in Oppos, buy me out or vote me out, she decided to break me out, which brings us back to that Friday morning, the morning she sent her into Oppos, enforcer into Oppos, a guy named Rick who looked like he'd been kicked out of every police academy in the state and decided that being and Oppos, security consultant and Oppos, for suburban HOA was his calling in life. I was standing there, sweat on my brow, just trying to get my house in order when he rolled up in a blacked-out SUV with no plates, wearing this heavy-duty vest with an Oppos, work enforcement and Oppos, stitched across the chest, and he didn't an Oppos. Asked, he commanded, telling me he was there for and Oppos, mandatory structure audit and Oppos, due to reported violations, and I just stood there, leaning against my truck, looking at this guy who was maybe 30 pounds heavier than he should have been and about 100% more confident than he had a right to be, and I told him, and Oppos, Rick or whatever your name is, you're trespassing on private property, and if you don't turn that car around, we're going to have a problem that a clipboard won in Oppos. Fix and Oppos, but he didn't in Oppos. Leave, he just stepped closer, his hand hovering near his belt, and he said in Oppos, you're making this difficult for yourself, Mr. Vance. The association has emergency powers, and you're obstructing an official investigation. And Oppos. And before I could even process the sheer delusion of that sentence, he lunged. Now, I've been in spots before. I spent 4 years in the Corps. I've seen what real aggression looks like, but I wasn't in Oppos. Expecting a suburban security guard to throw a sucker punch to my solar plexus, it caught me right under the ribs, and for a second, the world just turned into a gray blur of gasping for air, and before I could get my feet under me, he had me face down, his knee digging into the small of my back. And I felt the bite of those plastic zip ties, that high-pitched zip, zip, zip sound that tells you your freedom of movement just evaporated. And that's when the metal hit my skin, the cold, unmistakable weight of a handgun, and he's screaming in my ear about jurisdiction and rules. And I'm lying there thinking, this is it, this is how it ends, over a property line and a woman named Diane who can't stand A and oppos. No and oppos. But here's the thing about guys like Rick. They think the gear makes the man, they think the zip ties are the end of the conversation, but they don't realize that plastic has a breaking point, and so do people. He started pacing behind me, feeling like a big man, talking on his radio about an oppos, suspect in custody in oppos, and an oppos proceeding with the search in oppos. And I just took a deep breath, ignored the pain in my chest, and waited for him to get just a little too comfortable with his own voice. I felt him move toward my front door, thinking I was neutralized, and that's when I surged. I didn't in oppos. T go forward, I went up, snapping my shoulder blades together with every ounce of leverage I had, and I felt that plastic snap. It was a sharp, ugly sound, and suddenly my hands were free, and the adrenaline, man, it's a hell of a drug because I didn't in oppos. T even feel the gravel tearing up my knees as I spun around. He turned, eyes wide, reaching for his hip, but I was already there. I've spent 1,000 hours drilling for this, and my shoulder hit his chest like a freight train, pinning him against the side of my truck. The metal groaned, the glass rattled, and I didn't in oppos. To give him a chance to breathe, I buried a left hook into his jaw that made a sound like a dry branch snapping, and I watched the light just go out of his eyes for a second. He crumpled, the gun clattering onto the pavement, sliding away toward the edge of the grass. And I stood over him, my chest heaving, looking at this man who had tried to play God in my driveway. And for a moment, I wanted to keep going. I wanted to let out every bit of frustration from the last month of harassment. But then I saw him reaching, his fingers clawing for the weapon, and I knew I couldn't in oppos to let him get it back. I got to the gun first, my hand steady, the safety already off, and he looked up at me, blood leaking from his lip, and the bravado was gone, replaced by this pathetic, whimpering realization that the in oppos, jurisdiction in oppos, he'd been bragging about didn't in oppos. T exist out here in oppos. You're bluffing in oppos. He coughed, trying to stand up in oppos. You won in oppos. T do it. You in oppos. Regis the civilian in oppos. And I remember looking him right in the eye, feeling the weight of the trigger, and I said, and oppos, I in oppos. Am a homeowner defending his life. Rick, and you're a trespasser with a death wish and oppos. And when he made that one final, desperate lunge toward me, I didn't in oppos. T think I just fired. The sound was deafening, a single crack that echoed off the hills. And I watched him fall back, his hand clutching his thigh, the screaming starting almost immediately, a high-pitched, primal sound that brought the whole neighborhood out of their houses. I didn't in oppos. T run, I didn't in oppos. T keep shooting. I just dropped the magazine, cleared the chamber, and sat down on my tailgate with my hands in plain sight, waiting for the real sirens to arrive. And let me tell you, when the deputies rolled up, it was a circus. They saw the blood, they saw the fake tactical vest, and they saw me, sitting there calm as a Sunday morning. And when they finally got the story, when they saw the footage from my Nest Cam, which, thank God, I'd installed the week before, the whole house of cards Diane had built started to tumble. They found the emails on Rick's phone, the messages from Diane telling him to end oppos. Do whatever it takes to get inside that house and find something we can use, and oppos. And they realized this wasn't an oppos. A neighborhood dispute. It was a kidnapping and an attempted home invasion. The trial was a mess. The prosecution tried to say I used excessive force because Rick wasn't oppos, technically an oppos, unarmed when I pulled the trigger, but the judge, a no-nonsense guy who'd seen enough HOA drama to last a lifetime, looked at the footage of the zip ties and the initial assault, and he shook his head. I walked away with a slap on the wrist, a few months of probation for the discharge of a firearm. But Diane? She didn't in oppos. T fares so well. She's currently SE. Arving 5 years for conspiracy and criminal coercion, and the HOA she loved so much was sued into non-existence by the other neighbors who finally realized what kind of monster they'd been paying dues to. And Rick, well, he's had a permanent limp and a lot of time to think about his in oppos, jurisdiction in oppos, while he sits in a cell. But honestly, looking back on it, I don in oppos. T feel like a hero. I just feel like a guy who want to be left alone. And it's crazy. ISN and oppos. T it? That we live in a world where you have to fight a war just to enjoy your own front porch. But tell me, what would you have done? If someone put a gun to your head over a lawn violation, would you have waited for the police? Or would you have taken your life back into your own hands? I and Oppos am curious to hear if you think I went too far, or if I did exactly what needed to be done. So let me know in the comments, because I've been thinking about that Friday morning every day since, and I'm still not sure if they're the right answer, but I know I and Oppos do it again.